So by now you've likely heard the news that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has decided to close the Canadian border. His government has made that decision because of the emergent global health crisis. That's the reason, that to help flatten the curve and ensure that Canadians and indeed people from all over the world are safer, Canada's border access is being closed. I don't think many Canadians disagree with the Prime Minister, but there's one glaring exception which has a lot of people, myself included, asking some questions, and that's the decision to not exclude Americans, to basically say that the border is closed for pretty much everyone but American citizens. And I don't think this is the appropriate move. The government has insisted time and time and time again that the decisions they've been making over the past few days have been rooted overwhelmingly in scientific and health policy evidence about how to best protect Canadians, especially the most vulnerable Canadians. And therefore, it really makes me curious why we would not close the border of the country that sends the most foreign visitors to Canada on a day-to-day, weekly, monthly, and annual basis, and that's the United States. More Americans visit Canada in a given year than people from every other country in the world put together. And so if your viewpoint is that you're closing the borders to basically everyone but Americans, but allowing Americans to come in, it means that over half the people that might come in are still able to come in, aka all Americans, meaning that your border is still much more open than it is closed. And as Jagmeet Singh noted, the leader of the NDP, Canada's left party for my American viewers, sort of the more Bernie Sanders type figure of Canadian politics, he says, the PM's decision to exclude US tourists from the travel ban doesn't make any scientific sense. The US shares our only land border. 70% of tourists coming to Canada are American, and the public health situation in the US is worse than at home. Canadians need to know that the government's actions are based on evidence. Given the worsening public health situation in the US, the Liberals need to present solid public health evidence for leaving the US out of the travel ban and explain why Canadians are being put at risk. And that is bang on, because the Liberals have not provided that evidence. When they were asked this question by journalists earlier today, the journalists were basically saying, you say you want to do this for public health and safety, yet we know the United States has been woefully inadequate at dealing with this crisis due to Donald Trump's awful leadership and many other factors, one of the biggest being they don't have a single-payer healthcare system. So how can you leave the border open in this crucial moment with a country that's been less than adequate at dealing with the crisis, and as Jagmeet notes, has been less successful than we have been at dealing with the crisis? And the Liberals responded by basically saying that the deeply intertwined border and economy between Canada and the USA makes for special circumstances. But that basically undercuts their main point, doesn't it? Because if it's about public health and safety, then that economic link should be secondary to the need to ensure that Canadians, especially the most vulnerable Canadians, are protected from the spread of this particular health crisis. That's my view, at least. And many people were willing to give the government at least some slack, saying, look, it makes sense that you want goods shipped by train and by, truck and by vehicle to come over the border because we need goods and services and we need food for Canadian grocery stores. Obviously, you can't close the entirety of the border 100%, but why are you not closing the border off to, as Jagmeet notes, American tourists? Why are you allowing leisure visits from the United States, but not other visits from the UK or from Europe or from Asia or from anywhere else? And the government hasn't really given us all that good of an answer, indicating that they're not actually doing this for public health reasons. They're doing it for political reasons and economic reasons. They should be honest if that's their position. I don't know if Canadians will accept it, but they should be honest. I think the issue is, at least in part, that Justin Trudeau has long sort of been kowtowing to Donald Trump. A lot of American progressives see Justin Trudeau as the anti-Trump, but that couldn't be further from the truth. On any issue that's non-domestic in nature, Trudeau and Trump have a deep agreement. Whether it was the coups in Latin America, whether it's the love of fossil fuels internationally and at home, Trump and Trudeau are one and the same more than they're not. And Trump supporters might not agree, and I know Trudeau supporters wouldn't agree, but it's the truth. And I think that Justin Trudeau knows that, closing the border will create a political issue for Donald Trump and his Republican allies, and that could create issues for Canada on the political scene. And I think Justin Trudeau, because he's afraid of Donald Trump, because he doesn't want to disappoint his friend Donald Trump, isn't willing to close the border, even though under any reasonable definition of following scientific evidence, and under any reasonable understanding that the vast majority of non-Canadians that come to Canada are American, that border should be closed to everyone except for those essential services and those essential goods traveling across the border that Canadians will need over the coming weeks and months. So we need more honesty and clarity and transparency from our Prime Minister and our Liberal government. Jagmeet Singh and many others in the media have been asking for it, but we haven't gotten it yet. Canadians need to know that if you're not closing the border between Canada and the USA for health reasons, then why are you keeping it open? Until Canadians get a clear answer, we can only assume that Justin Trudeau is putting the health of Canada's most vulnerable people at risk for his personal and governmental political interests.